report from the StatsSA and a memorandum from NEHAWU, which in my understanding has been circulated to all members. We are in a very difficult situation. It's worse with us because people are expecting that the Department of Employment and Labor must ensure that people are employed. Yes, it is to ensure that people are employed, but it is its main responsibility in us conducting our oversight is to ensure that a conducive environment is created. And that's what then between now and the new normal, I hear people talking about post-COVID. COVID is here to stay. I think it's post-lockdown, hoping that we're not going to go back to other levels. That we are to ensure that that environment is created. We have got different views on that and make everybody to understand, because ours is not about who speaks better, who articulates better. Ours is to ensure that the country, in all sectors, in all departments, that conducive environment is to be created. So StatsSA is going to make us to be a bit more empowered, as we will then be executing our responsibility as the Portfolio Committee on Employment and Labor. Having said that, I'm welcoming everybody, and I will then allow Mr. Sakaza to take us through who is here and who is not here and why.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to all the members and my colleagues. Chair, we almost have the full complement of the committee again. We've got one apology from Honorable as the full member. We also have a bit of a problem with Honorable Zuma. She phoned me to say that she doesn't have a good network. She's on and off sometimes because of network problem. But here we have yourself, Honorable Nkabane, Honorable Hermans, Honorable Yinana, Honorable Mkondo, Honorable Zuma on and off, Honorable Denner, Honorable Begram, Honorable Mdabe, Honorable Nonsele, Honorable Ngwezi, and Honorable Kado from the members, Chair. And then from the support staff, we've got our researcher, Mr. Mkwena. We've got our content advisor, Mr. Ngobo. We've got our communications officer, Mr. Mkwena also, and myself, Chair. And then we've got people from the StatsSA that you said they will say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sakaza. Can we then get from the StatsSA who is here, who's leading the delegation? I will then allow Mr. Sakaza to take us through.
Good morning. Malrato Musiane from StatsSA. I'm currently the acting chief of labor statistics. I'll be taking you through the presentation.
Chair, we almost have.
You were so fast, I couldn't pick up your name, ma'am.
Malrato Musiane.
Oh, thank you. The department.
Good morning, honourable members and honourable Chair.
Sorry, Chair, Zolani, if I can quickly, there's also someone else from the StatsSA, Chair.
Who is he or she?
Gwen, are you there? Gwen, are you gonna?
Good morning. My name is Gwen Letwenya, acting DDG for Population and Social Statistics. Thanks.
Thank you. department.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, honorable members. From the department, we have, firstly, Chair, an apology from the DG. That would not be, I don't see him in the meeting, and he has indicated that he has difficulty in connecting. Then myself as Virgil Seafield, DDJ, LP and IR. We have also the Inspector General, Egi Moilwa, that is part of of our representation. In addition to that, Chair, we have Tando Wababa, that is Mr. Tando Wababa, that is representing the Minister's Office, and as well as Sandy Muela, that is representing the Deputy Minister's Office. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I can see that we have got some other people that must tell us who they are. I see somebody called Miss or Mr. Vasson, yeah. Can we then get? I see somebody from PMG. Can they indicate? I see somebody Tango, whoever. And they must tell us which institution they are coming from. Because if they're not prepared to tell us who they are, they must be taken out. Because like in the committee, we want people to tell us who they are and where they are coming from.
My name is Tengo Tengela. I'm from NEHAWU Parliamentary Office. Thank you very much. I'm here as an observer.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chairperson Abongo Kobogana from the SABC Radio News.
Why should I ask you, Abongo? Don't be naughty. Okay. There's somebody from PMG.
Hello.
PMG backup. Who are you?
Can you hear me?
Can you speak?
This is Prince Changole, from a monitor from the PMG.
If PMG in the next visual meetings you don't put your name, we will take you out, because I don't know who's PMG backup. So you must put your name in full so that you know.
Yes, madam. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Whoever is going to we're not going to be prescriptive. Can they then shoot? Ma'am Malira, is it you?
I'm just uploading the presentation.
Okay.
Can you all see the presentation?
I can't see, but oh, I see you. I see you. I see you. I see you. Okay, you can. I will request that everybody's camera must be off so that we are able to get the StatsSA.
Thank you, ma'am. Can you all see the presentation so I can proceed?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for inviting us. I'm representing the Statistician General who could not be with us today. So I will take you through the presentation, which is based on the quarterly labor force survey that was released on the 29th of September. Status information, but because of the restrictions that were brought about by COVID-19, we could not go to people's houses to contain the spread of COVID-19. So we had to change our way of collecting data. We moved to collecting data through telephones. So we called people to collect the information. This was facilitated by the fact that when we collect information in the quarterly labor force survey, we also collect the contact numbers for the households that we visit. However, we did not have telephone numbers for all the households that we normally visit. So we had to use the sample that we used in the first quarter of 2020 so that we could have as many telephone numbers as possible. And we only had about 63% of households having telephone numbers. And we are aware that because we only visited those households that have telephone numbers, there is some bias that was introduced in the estimates that we produced for quarter 2. And we put some measures in place to adjust the estimates to account for the bias that was introduced by going to telephone-only households. I should share with you the definitions that we use. And for a person to be unemployed, that person should have been in the working age, that is between the ages of 15 and 64 in the reference week. They should have been without work, and they looked for work in the 4 weeks before the survey interview, and they were available. However, in the second quarter, because of the national lockdown, it was physical movement. As you can see on the slide here, we have different ways of looking for work that we regard as active job search activities. For instance, people would go and ask friends and relatives if there are jobs in the places where they work, or they would wait by the street side where casual workers are usually found. And because of the lockdown, this was not possible. But there are other ways where people can place advertisements on the website, or they can search the internet, which don't require people to move. So that is why we see the unemployment rate that we saw of 23.3% that was published on the 29th. Otherwise, if anyone did not look for work, we would not be able to publish anything because the unemployment rate would be 0. There was a lot of increase in the other not economically active population. We have seen people moving out of employment and others moving out of unemployment. And this increased the people who are completely out of the labor force by about 5.2 million between quarter 1 and quarter 2 of 2020. And this phenomenon that we see of a high increase in the not economically active population is not only, it's not unique to South Africa, it is a global phenomenon. We have seen this happening in other countries, and we have a list of countries here on the screen that have collected the quarterly labor force survey during the lockdown, where they have also seen a huge increase in the population that is not economically active. So StatsSA cannot act on its own, where we could just change the definitions because of the lockdown. So we continued to use the internationally agreed upon definition by the International Labour Organization. South Africa is 20%, and in Mozambique is 22%. We should be using the same definition so that the estimates can be comparable. That is why we did not change the definition that we used in the collection of the labor market information in the second quarter, even though we know there was the national lockdown as a result of COVID-19. In 2020, we had about 39 million people who were aged from 15 to 64 years old. And of this 39 million people, 18.4 million were in the labor force. And the labor force consists of those who are employed and those who are unemployed. So we had 14.1 million people who were employed, 4.3 million unemployed. and the rest, that is 20.6 million, were out of the labor force, of which 2.5 million were the discouraged work seekers. So given the decline that we have seen in the employed and the unemployed, this resulted in the unemployment rate decreasing from 30.1% in the first quarter of 2020 to 23.3% in the second quarter. And in this next slide here, you can see where the movements, how the movements happened. There were very large movements in all the three categories of the labor market, the labor market status that we have. We moved from 16.4 million people who were employed to 14.1. And for the unemployed, we moved from 7.1 in the first quarter to 4.3 million in the second quarter. And we also had 2.9 million people who were discouraged work seekers in the first quarter, and this declined to 2.5 million in the second quarter. And we have seen a huge increase from 12.5 million people who are not economically active to 18.1 million in the second quarter. That is the other not economically active population. And here it's just to show that we had 13.6% fewer people who were employed between the two quarters, that is the first quarter and the second quarter, and 39.2% contraction in the number of people who were unemployed, and an increase of 33% in those who were out of the labor force. And for those who were not economically active, we usually ask the reasons why they did not look for work and why they are not in the labor force. And for most of the quarters, the past quarters, the biggest share of the not economically active would be students that account for about 40%. But in the second quarter, we have seen this declining to 31.6%. And we have seen a decline in all categories. Discouraged work seekers, those who indicated that they were too young or too old to work, those who have an illness or disability that prevents them from working, the homemakers, but we have seen a huge increase in those who have other reasons. And when we unpacked these other reasons, most of them indicated that they were not looking for work because of the national lockdown or COVID-19 or coronavirus. But that's the main reason that they have given. That is why we are seeing this huge increase here from 6.6% in the first quarter to 29.4% in the second quarter of those people who indicated other reasons. And in terms of the labor decline in employment and a decline in unemployment, and the gap between the absorption rate and the labor force participation rate is still high, where we are seeing a difference of 11 percentage points between in the second quarter. In terms of the unemployment rate, as I've already said, it has declined by 6.8 percentage points from 30.1% to 23% in the second quarter. And over time, we have seen unemployment rate increasing to the highest rate of 30.1% in the first quarter of 2020. And now in the second quarter, we are seeing a decline to 23.3%. And this is not an indication of. And we have two definitions of unemployment that we use, that we usually publish in the quarterly labor force survey report. We have the official definition that I've been talking to, where for you to be unemployed, you should have looked for work and also available for work, and or to start a business should the conditions allow. And then we also know that there are people who may not look for work because of other reasons other than discouragement. They may not have money to go out to look for work, or they have other responsibilities of looking after their family members or children or the elderly or other reasons. And as such, as long as a person says they were available for work, even if they did not look for work. According to the expanded definition of unemployment, we include them in the calculation of the unemployment rate. So the job search criterion is relaxed. As long as the person says I'm available, then they are regarded as unemployed. And we have seen an increase in this rate to 42% from 39.7% into the expanded definition of unemployment. And this also includes the discouraged work seekers and those who were also available but did not look for work for other reasons other than discouragement. And these were 3.5 million who did not look for work because of other reasons other than discouragement. And if you look at the provincial picture, we are seeing that 5 provinces had official unemployment rate lower than the national average of 23.3%, where Mpumalanga had the lowest unemployment rate of 13.3% according to the official definition. But if you move to the expanded definition, Mpumalanga had the unemployment rate of 45.4%, and the Eastern Cape had the highest unemployment rate. Whether you're using the official definition or expanded definition, it was having the highest rates, more than all the rest of the other provinces. And Gauteng followed with 26.4% if you use the official definition. Now moving to employment, we have seen the formal sector accounting for the biggest share of employment over time. Even in the second quarter, formal sector accounted for 71% of total employment. And if you look at the sectors individually, when you look at the formal sector that employs 10.1 million people, there was a decline in employment of 1.2 million in the formal sector, which translates to a contraction of 10.8% within this sector. And if you look at the informal sector, it also shared 640,000 jobs, and that is equivalent to 21.9% contraction. Then agriculture also shed 66,000 jobs, or 7.6% reduction in employment in that particular sector. And the private households was the hardest hit, that the private households sector. And in terms of industries as well, we have seen contraction within all industries. And construction was the hardest hit, that contracted by 23%. I'm sorry, private households contracted by 23% and construction by 21%. But in the second quarter, trade lost 373,000 jobs, finance 283,000, and mining shed 63,000 jobs. And if we look at the share of employment as opposed to the share of nominal GDP for each of these industries, we have seen trade, construction, and agriculture having higher employment shares relative to their GDP contribution. For instance, trade accounts for 12.8% of nominal GDP, but in terms of employment, it accounts for 20.8% of total employment. But if you look at community and social services, it accounts for 27% of nominal GDP, but in terms of employment, it only employs 22.9% of total employment. Now looking at the unemployment rate for the young people aged 15 to 24, they had an unemployment rate of 52.3%, which was 6.7 percentage points lower than in the previous quarter. Usually this age group is the hardest hit when it comes to their prospects in the labor market. They really struggle. They have a high unemployment rate, low absorption rate, and low participation rate compared to people in other age groups. The unemployment rate now by population group, the Black Africans had the highest unemployment rate of 26.3%, which was higher than the national average of 23.3%. And the white population group has the unemployment rate of 6.1%, and the Indians 14.4%, and the colored population 19.0%. Now, looking at the sex differences, women are always having the higher unemployment rate compared to their male counterparts. But the Black women are the most vulnerable in the South African labor market, with an unemployment rate that is above 28% when we use the official definition of unemployment. And we have seen a decline in the unemployment rates within each population group, and within Indian Asians, we have seen female unemployment rate increasing from 15.3% to 23% between these two quarters. And we are seeing a similar picture when we look at the expanded definition, where irrespective of gender, the Black, Africans, and the colored population always have the highest unemployment rates compared to the other population groups. We added the additional questions to the quarterly labor force survey questionnaire to try and establish how people were operating during the national lockdown, whether they were receiving salaries, and if they were receiving reduced salaries or they were still receiving the full salaries, and whether they were certain that they were going to be returning to their jobs once the lockdown is lifted or not, or they fear losing their jobs or their businesses closing down as a result of the lockdown. And of the 14.2 million people who were employed in the second quarter of 2020, 58.1% were expected to work during the national lockdown by the companies or organizations that they work for. And this is where they were operating from. There were about 53% of the professionals managed to work from the places of work, and 47% worked from home. And we are seeing the proportion of those who work from home being higher among those who are likely to have the tools of trade to work from home. That's the professionals and managers and those who have who are in skilled agriculture and technicians. But if you move down to the domestic workers, only 0.6% manage to work from home. And also the plant and machine operators can't really work from home. Hence, we are seeing a very small percentage of them working from home, and 98.5% of them working from their place of work. And we also asked whether they were receiving the salary during the national lockdown. And 81.3% of the people who were employed, they indicated that they continued to receive their salary. But we had about 17.6% of them not receiving any salary. And we also established that of those who received pay, 78.9% continued to receive a full salary. But we had about 21.1% of those who worked indicating that they received a reduced salary. And this reduction in salary looks like it's linked to the level of education. As you can see, graduates, among graduates, only 10.3% indicated having reduced salaries, but 89% continued to have their full salaries. But if you look at those who have less than matric, the proportion of those who did not receive a full salary was higher, that is 24.8%. And this seems to decrease as the education level increases. Now, in terms of the recap, based on the quarterly labor force survey Q2 results, we have seen unemployment rate decreasing by 6.8 percentage points from 30.1% in the previous quarter to 23.3% in Q2. And we have seen all industries losing jobs, and more than 500,000 of those jobs being lost in community and social services, 373,000 in trade, and private households losing 311,000 jobs. And we have seen that massive increase in the not economically active population between the two quarters, increasing by 5.2 million. And in the previous meeting that we had with the portfolio committee meeting where we presented, there were some questions that were asked in terms of youth, why we were including those people who are under the age of 15 when we compute our labor market indicators. And in terms of our definition, we collect information from those who are 15 years and older. And we have looked at the basic conditions of the act that looks at the compulsory school going age, that is Act number 84 of 1996, South African Schools Act that was published in 1996. It states that subject to this act and any applicable provincial law, every parent must cause every learner to whom he or she is responsible to attend a school from the first school day of the year in which such a learner reaches the age of 7 years until the last day of the year in which such a learner reaches the age of 15 or the 9th grade, whichever comes first. So given this, we have decided as a country to start collecting labor market information from age 15, because after age 15, it's not compulsory for kids to be in school. And this is according to the ILO guidelines. They do indicate that each country should look at the existing laws in terms of the age at which they can start collecting labor market information. And in some countries, they even start at the age of 10, some start at 14, and some start at 15. Like in terms of children being engaged in economic activities, we have the survey that we run, that is a survey that measures the child labor, where we look at whether children were involved in economic activities or not, and how much time they were spending in those activities, because there are different thresholds that indicate whether a child is in child labor or not. And from this survey that we ran, we have noted that there were about 96.5% of children were involved in production of own consumption. That is, they were involved in doing activities for their own homes. And in terms of involvement in economic activities by sex, we have seen 97.4% of girls being involved in production for own consumption. And in terms of boys, they were engaged in economic activities for both market and own production. Market meaning they were producing products that were sold in the market, and for own production, it means they were consumed at home. So we have seen more boys being engaged in economic activities for both market and own production, more than girls. The proportion decreased between 2010 and 2015. And for those who were aged 15 to 15, of those children who were involved in economic activities. But being involved in economic activities does not necessarily mean they were in child labor. It depends on the conditions under which they were working, and whether they were hazardous or whether they were spending too many hours doing economic activities. And the main reason why children worked was mainly to get some pocket money from their parents. And we have seen this increasing by. And in the previous meeting also, there were some questions in terms of the foreign nationals, in terms of how are their labor market prospects compared to South African born citizens. And we here in this slide, we are indicating that we had 35.4 million people who were born in South Africa in this survey. That is, we had a module that was attached to the labor force survey in 2017, and previously it was in 2012. And only 5.3% of those of working age were foreign nationals, that's about 2 million. And now in terms of their labor market status, among South Africans, we had 14.9 million people employed, 5.9 million unemployed, 2.4 million who of the labor force. And among the foreign nationals, we had 1.2 million of them being employed, 76,000 discouraged work seekers, and 0.4 million people being in other not economically active, and 0.3 million being unemployed. And in terms of unemployment rate among South Africans, it was 28.4%, and among foreign nationals, the unemployment rate was 18.4%. And that is the end of the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. There was a time that I couldn't just see the presentation. I'll have to use my phone. But what I can do, unfortunately, people won't be able to see my face because I don't want to mess up the meeting. Members, there is the presentation. Are there any questions, clarities?
Yes, Madam Chair, Michael Bagram.
And the next one, can I just take the name first?
Michael Cardo.
Honorable Bagram.
Mkhonto.
Honorable Cardo. Honorable Mkhonto.
Honorable Nkabane.
Honorable Nkabane.
Honorable Hinana.
Honorable Hinana.
Or Nonsele.
Honorable Nonsele. Is that the order? Let me then start. Honorable Cardo. I'm sorry, Honorable Bagram.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to Statistics for letting us have this feedback. I do appreciate it, and obviously it's not easy doing the work during COVID-19 lockdown. The lockdown seems to have destroyed everything, including the ability to properly report from statistics. I think back to a quote made many years ago where they said lies, damn lies, and statistics. It was Mark Twain who said that. And I think this sort of sings quite loudly in what I'm hearing today, because with the changing criteria that you're using all the time, it becomes incredibly difficult for people to plan with your information, because it keeps changing your approach to dealing with it. What we're looking for, obviously, is proper statistics where you're comparing apples and apples, and not like we had in the past where we would compare apples to oranges, and it looks like we are going backwards on that. And I want your comment on it, because we keep hearing about your changing criteria and structures, and it's not good. I know you had to postpone this result, and I think one of the reasons given is that you didn't have enough financing, or there was some problem with your financing, and maybe you can explain why you had to postpone it. I'm also hearing from many of the organizations out there in the labor field, such as the trade unions, COSATU in particular, as an umbrella body, are not accepting your statistics, and they're saying it's a lot worse. Anecdotally, I must tell you that I'm sitting in a little office where I'm seeing more retrenchments than I've ever seen. In fact, a lot worse than it was in 2008. And so I can't understand why you are now coming with figures that seem to be a lot easier on the eye, and I don't think it's right. I don't think what you're telling us is reflecting reality at all. And I don't think anyone in the public seems to think that either. So maybe you can comment on it, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Bagram. Honorable Cardo.
Thank you, Chair. It gives a highly distorted picture of the employment situation in South Africa. The official rate is down 6.8 percentage points to 23.3%. When we know that because of COVID-19 and very strict lockdown, that more and more people don't have jobs. So I think it is deceptive and distorted. People between the ages of 15 and 64 weren't economically active in quarter two, you see that the category of other has increased by 23.4 percentage points between quarter one and quarter two in terms of the economically active population. Please could you explain exactly who the other are? By StatsSA on Thursday, can you explain to us what the difference is between the quarterly labour force survey and the quarterly employment statistics? Can you give us a foretaste of what Thursday's data is likely to reveal? Is it likely to corroborate what was found by the quarterly labour force survey for the second quarter in terms of unemployment rates, or to be from the quarterly labour force survey? And then thirdly, I mean, I must concede that you've been very honest about the methodological constraints imposed by the lockdown, in particular the fact that your data was collected for quarterly labour force survey using this computer-assisted telephone interviewing rather than the usual face-to-face interviews, and therefore you could only get a sample that didn't include certain households. But I just read the fact that you have depleted expertise. Is this going to have a significant bearing on the quality of employment data that comes out in future? And are we right to be skeptical of what you present to us, given the fact that StatsSA late? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Kado. Honorable Mkonto.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, honorable members and colleagues from StatsSA and the department. Chair, during this quarter and the statistics were given today, no, it's very difficult to accept these stats, because we have a very high number of people who have lost their jobs during the quarter under review. So maybe we can encourage StatsSA and check with them what is their numbers in terms of people that are losing their job and ultimately claiming from the UIF. I did not see the statistics on how ability with disabilities that are ready for the market and are unemployed. If that statistics can be included, because we want to know, Chair, the surveys and the samples, I don't think, Chair, they are giving us we can check with other departments, specifically those that are ready to go to the labor market. Let us encourage these institutions to have systems of tracing their graduates into the labor market. Maybe those numbers can assist a lot. That will be my input.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mkonto. Honorable Nkabane.
Thank you, Chairperson. Greetings to the honorable members and the officials from the department and StatsSA. Chair, one is going to take this opportunity to welcome the presentation. My bite, Chair, will be on the is presented by Mamu Maluleke, Chair. Because when you look at this broad definition, what she's referring to is basically on the South African Schools Act, as well as the basic conditions of employment and Section 28 of the Constitution. Now, my chairperson, my argument is, how then do we align this expanded definition with Section 3 of the Labor Relations Act, read together with Section 28, 1A and 3 of the Bills of Rights, Chapter 2 of the Constitution? For me, when I look at this definition, my observation is that there are two conflicting versions of expanded definition of unemployment with what the StatsSA is presenting and Act stipulates, Chair. One can argue that the StatsSA now is not providing us the true reflection of what is happening on the ground if you make reference to the labor statutes derived from the Constitution. Now, what I want to get is that how should we, as all the sectors in government, come up with an integrated approach that will take into cognizance of all the relevant factors and statutes that governs us, since the Constitution is the supreme law of the country, Chairperson. That's my argument. Now, city or TVET, Chairperson, or in high school. So how do you begin? How do you begin when you when you conduct your labor market survey? How do you then start from 15 years? I understand that they are also making reference to the ILO guidelines, but we need to come up with something that talks to what is happening on the ground, that talks to us as South Africans, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Ngabane. Honorable Yinana.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Let me as well greet everyone in the committee, you, Chairperson, the honorable members, and the staff, and the people from StatsSA. Let me as well add to say that I welcome the presentation SA, with the understanding that there has been the budget cut. Is this information that is being presented to us scientifically verifiable? I am asking this because if there is a constraint of finance and there is a challenge of lockdown, it therefore means that the analysis is raised, because that is what fundamentally has to be done. Because if there are no finances, there are going to be really constraints. And how do we therefore make the conclusion during the lockdown period? And Chairperson, my focal question was going to be on page 20 and 21 about the black and the colored factors, that this group is very vulnerable, taking into account that we are living in a country that for many years have been a challenge of disparities. And if at the moment, at this day of age now, we are having the issue of that there are vulnerable people, what might be the contributing factors? Because we need to understand that if a particular group has got this vulnerability, the contributing factors are, and the remedial programs are like this. It goes together with the one raised by my colleague about the disabled people. We are not giving sufficient information about how do the disabled people being catered. And therefore, when the state was making this, whether the telephone care or visitation of the people, things that can be done in order to accommodate them. Chairperson, from NATLEC, all the stakeholders, whether it's business or the trade unions, they also complain about the very bad situation of unemployment, something that is totally different to what we are being presented today. Then the question is, how accurate, therefore, the information that we are given, so that is information that we can use and accept all of us. And if that is the case, what the StatsSA can do in order to come back with.
Honorable Nonsele.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, all honorable members. Good morning, StatsSA. Chair, let me join colleagues in appreciating the presentation and maybe say, maybe upfront that I fully agree with what Honorable Nkabane has raised. I think maybe it would be fair, Chair, to say the presentation is a rather work in progress than to question its validity. Because I think the points that are raised, that some of the areas are distorted by the occasion of the lockdown. And in that consequence is that some of the people, for instance, that we can make example for unemployment or in terms of lockdown. Hence, we had the UIF temporary employees relief scheme, because those claims were basically based on that. And largely those people have gone back to work. So the consequence, therefore, could be either two-way, that if you phone people without direct interaction and they're at home, you may have had a distorted view of what you might have currently with regard to your unemployment stats. Hence, my view is that perhaps it would be more better rather to say the report is work in progress, and a much more clearer view would in fact arise in the following quarter, where, for instance, would be able to give a clear picture of who is essentially in the employment full-time and who is not in the employment full-time. There is that kind of distortion that we must appreciate as a first point. But having said so, Chair, I think the points that are the point that needs to be pushed down. When we went into lockdown, unemployment rate was at the highest, almost 29 or almost 30. That is the narrow definition. And at the broader definition, it was above 30, around 35, up to 37. So in a way, it gives you a sense that if, for instance, you take the necessarily be agreeable to say those stats in terms, for instance, of the broad definition of those who are discouraged from work could have invariably gone up. And taking into account the spike in terms of poverty level and the extent to which these have been exposed by COVID-19, it would mean that to a greater extent, the arguments that StatsSA are bringing to fore may necessarily be true, but because there are these questions, for instance, of the absence of direct contact with the respective individuals who are interviewed, then that question is thrown into that area. Hence, I would say on my side, whilst appreciating the report, I would rather for a caution that says it's still work in progress until a clearer view is in fact put forward, so that we do not conflict, which I agree with is what I said earlier on by Honorable Nkabane, that the points that relates to the definition of children is a bit problematic. Because also, if you go, for instance, to the United Nations Charter, 18 is in fact the minimum age requirement that is taken to for condition of employment. You have to apply for a special permission if you are going to employ anyone below the age of 18. What it means, therefore, it means some kind of caution has to be followed. Maybe we would need to find a win-win approach. For instance, the StatsSA, in terms of its reporting requirements to the ILO, it has to use 15, but it can delineate the areas based on age relevant to of the numbers that are affected, minus the 15, 16, 17 number. If, for instance, there is an area of account relative to those who have been given special permission, then those statistics can be derived from the Department of Employment and Labor, and they can be factored. And I'm sure it's 1 in a million at a time, and they cannot make quite a significant high number throughout the country. So those are the points that perhaps we may have to find a common ground with StatsSA so that we do not continue time and again to haggle around this question of 15 to 24, but find a win-win approach on how we can deal with that. I think that's an area we raised even previously when they came to make a presentation, so that we don't have to go back and forth on this. Maybe it's a proposal, Chair, that maybe we find a way that is in conformity with their own standards in terms of, for instance, of ensuring of their reporting requirements, both in terms of law and in terms of the international platforms where they relate in terms of the stats that they present to us on this day. Yeah, I would make that general comment here, but I would refuse and not support the view that says the report should be rejected. Rather, we can note it as work in progress and look forward to the next report. Where, for instance, there are really serious discrepancies, I think StatsSA would respond to that. But I reject this view that says it should be rejected. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nonsele. Can I just check if there are any other members who want to speak before we allow Mr.
My hand, Chair. Sibusiso Ntabe.
Honorable Ndabe? And then after you.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. It's just one comment because I'm covered by the previous speakers. The Auditor General gave us a report on audited UIF dispensations in relation to the employees that could not afford to pay salaries. The report from StatsSA says there are 14.1 million people employed in the country. Now, based on the report from the Auditor General, the amount the employer relief scheme equates to 16.2 million people that have been paid. Now, that discrepancy is quite huge because UIF would not have paid 16.2 people employed, but the Auditor General audited was from March to June. I think that is the second quarter as well for the StatsSA, unless I'm misinterpreting it. If we can get clarity, why would there be such a huge discrepancy? But maybe going forward, taking the cue from Honorable Nonsele, there has to be a way of departments, especially those that state from a particular department that deals with employment, and StatsSA have a different view or different systems, understanding as well that they might be operating from different spaces. However, somehow there has to be a coordinated approach in terms of how do we deal with the
honorable members. Let me say upfront, if I get cut, I was cut from some time, and if I can we get the response from the StatsSA on questions and concerns? And
I will try my best to respond to most of the questions that have been raised. Honorable Michael Beckram was concerned about the figures that we have published, indicating that it's difficult to plan using this kind of information that we have published, and that we have changed criteria in terms of collecting the information. Yes, it was difficult for us to go to people's houses, so we had to change the methodology only in terms of the mode of collection, but we have not changed the sample that we are using. The questions that we used in quarter two are exactly the same as the ones that we have been asking in the previous quarters. So the only change that was introduced was the mode of collection in terms of moving from face-to-face collection to in the results as we published them, but the results are what they are, and we have explained why they are the way they are. We did not change the definitions that we have used. For you to be unemployed, as I've said, you should have looked for work and be available to take up the job should it be given to you, or start a business should the conditions allow for you to start a business. The definitions that we used, then we wouldn't be saying there was so many 2.2 million people lost jobs, because we would not be able to compare the estimates for Q2 with the estimates from the previous quarters. But because we kept the definitions the same, we were able to come up with this number to say there were 2.2 million people who lost jobs, and the unemployment rate has declined. And it has declined, as I have said before, as a consequence of the national lockdown, because people could not go out to look for work. And given that the definition that we are using requires active job search and availability. So because people did not look for work, they were pushed out of unemployment. Hence, we are seeing a decline in the number of people who are employed by 2.8 million between the two quarters. And yes, there might have been a lot of retrenchments during this quarter, but some companies only announced that they will be retrenching people, and there's a time lag between the announcement and when looking for work. And these are the estimates that we are seeing. I don't know if in the next quarter we'll see an indication of these retrenchments in the numbers that we will be publishing. And we have followed the international guidelines in terms of producing these figures, and our data is also available, is what they will get if they were to do their own computations. So the data is there. Researchers can download the data and do their research to compare the estimates that we have and what they would compute themselves. And usually it takes us 4 weeks to process the data after data collection. We publish 4 weeks after the end of the quarter. But in the second quarter, because of the change in the mode of collection, also we had to do some adjustments to the estimates. Like I said earlier, that there was some bias that was introduced by only going to those households that have telephone numbers. So that process of adjustment took longer than we expected. Hence, we had to postpone the publication twice. It was supposed to be published in July, but we ended up publishing in September. Indicated that the QLFS is giving a very skewed picture or distorted picture, as people don't have jobs. Yes, people don't have jobs, but as long as they did not look for work, they will not be included in the number of people who are unemployed. And now there was a specifics that people have provided for not looking for work. And these reasons are listed here. That is the students, homemakers, but we have that big chunk of people who indicated other reasons. And as I have indicated, these other reasons, people have indicated of the 5.2 million people who said they did not look for work for other reasons. 5.1 million of them indicated national lockdown or coronavirus or COVID-19 as the main reason why they did not look for work. So that is the biggest chunk of that other category that we are seeing there. And there was, yes, and the quarterly labor force survey is a household survey where we go to people's houses to find out, to collect information from the people themselves. So we take what the respondent tells us. But from the QES, we collect information from the businesses where we send out questions. Only focuses on the formal sector, non-agriculture employment and earnings. But the QLFS covers the whole economy, where we also look at the informal sector, as well as people who are employed in agriculture and in private households as well, that are not covered in the QES. And there's also a difference in terms of sample size, where in the quarterly labor force survey, we go to about 28,000 households every quarter. And in the QES, we visit about 20, we send out questionnaires to about 20,000 businesses. And the QES is estimates are derived from the payroll. If at the end of the quarter there were 20 people on the payroll, then there will be 20 people that were employed. Even if in the previous month there were 25, but by the end of the quarter, we take what is on the payroll at the end of the quarter. But with the QLFS, the reference period is that you was employed. And if you did not look for work in the 4 weeks, or if you looked for work in the 4 weeks preceding the survey interview, and you were also available, then you are regarded as unemployed. So the differences are there between these two surveys. And in terms of the classifications, as I've said, in terms of what we include in the QES and what we include in the QLFS, we exclude agriculture from the QES and private households. And in the QLFS, we also have employers and own account workers that are included in the estimates that we publish. But the QES is only based on the employees. So those are the differences between the QLFS and the QES. Hence, we see these differences between the estimates from these surveys to be showing an increase in employment, but the QES is showing a decrease. As long as the two surveys move in the same direction, that is fine. They're supposed to be complementing each other, but not competing against each other. And the QES, as you rightly say, the estimates will be published tomorrow. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you how the estimates look like. We'll have to wait for tomorrow to see whether the QES estimates are in line with the QLFS or not. And the budget cuts did not really have any impact on the Q2 estimates that we are seeing. And within StatsSA, there's a prioritization, reprioritization process where the key products will continue to be done, whether they're budget cuts or not. And there are other projects that can be put on hold, but the key products like the QLFS will continue to be funded. Funding, and that process will continue. So we'll continue to ask for more funding so that we can continue to produce the labor market indicators as we have been doing. And also, there are municipalities that have been requesting low area estimates, like so that they have estimates at the municipality level. And that requires the sample size to be increased. And due to these budget cuts, for now, that is not possible for us to go to lower levels of reporting for the QLFS. Yeah, I think I've answered the questions for the Honorable Kandu. Now moving on to Honorable Konto. And in terms of the people who have applied for UIF, the number being high, and you're finding difficult to accept the stats that we have here. It happened that you're still employed, but you're not getting a full salary. Therefore, you could also claim UIF. So UIF is, I think, not only for those who are completely unemployed, and also those who are temporarily laid off. If they're definitely returning to the jobs that they have, as long as they're returning within 3 months, they're still regarded as jobs, should be high. Yes, we have said 2.2 million people lost jobs, but that doesn't translate to those 2.2 million people being unemployed, because you have, as I have said, you have to be without work, looked for work, and available to take up employment for you to be regarded as unemployed. And yes, we will check with UIF figures to as when we do confrontation to see if the estimates that we are publishing are in line with what UIF estimates look like in future as per your proposal. And in terms of disability, Unfortunately, we don't have a disability question in the QLFS questionnaire for us to be able to have estimates for people with disability. However, we are working, especially given that the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, they require that we disaggregate the data by disability. So we are in the process of looking at the disability questions that were proposed by the Oxford group to see how we can incorporate them in the quarterly labor force survey going forward. And unfortunately, you indicated that StatsSA is not giving you the estimates that are close to what you expect. And unfortunately, this is what we have. And we have outlined the methodology that we have used to collect this information. And yes, as I've said before, these figures can be researchers can look at what we have produced and they can compute the figures and see if what we are doing is acceptable or not, or it's following the guidelines that we are supposed to be following. And you've also indicated that you would encourage the institutions of higher learning to trace these people, but I think that one was more of a comment. Now moving on to Honorable Nkabane. He was talking to the expanded definition of unemployment, the Constitution. I am not aware of that definition, ma'am. I will have to look at it and see if we can compare the estimates that we have for the expanded definition that we have with the one that you are highlighting that is there in the Constitution. But for StatsSA, the definition that we are using is actually the expanded definition is for South African conditions or situation, because we are saying as long as a person is available, even if they did not actively look for work, they are still regarded as unemployed. So we do publish the official definition of unemployment and the expanded definition as well. And in terms of the 15-year-olds being included in our estimates while they are still in school or TVET, we started age 15, as I've said earlier, because the compulsory school going age is until a child turns 15 or they complete grade 9. And this is not to say that we are saying children who are 15 years should look for work, but we know there are some who are looking for work and are actually working. And it's not necessarily full-time employment, or they're working full-time. For instance, if I own a small spaza shop and my daughter helps me out in that particular business after school, and she does that activity for at least 1 hour in a week, she is regarded as employed, as much as university students who do a lot of part-time work after attending their lectures. So they are included in this estimate as well. So that is why we have this 15 years. We are starting to collect labor market information from 15 years, but it's not to say we are encouraging children to leave school and go and work. And then Honorable Hinana, he talked about the issues of budget cuts and whether the information that we are publishing is really scientifically verifiable. Yes, as I have said, the figures are there and the data, the raw data sets, or rather the unit record data sets are out there in the public domain. Anyone can download them and check how we arrived at the estimates that we have, and actually recompute the estimates if they want to. And we also publish the indicators of quality, where we will say whether the figure that we are publishing is, or the change rather, that we are seeing is statistically significant or not. So we publish the coefficient of variation, we publish the p-values and the confidence intervals within which we say this estimate that you're seeing, we can say it's correct or accurate with certainty. and we use 95% confidence intervals around all our estimates. And on slide 20 and 21, you were talking about the unemployment rate among Black Africans and colored being high, and what are the contributing factors to this. We don't really ask or come up with any contributing factors to the picture that we are seeing. However, we do have, given that the QLFS design is in such a way that we can check the estimates from the previous quarter compared to the current quarter and see if the labor market status between the two quarters has changed. Was this person employed in the last quarter? What is the status in the current quarter? We are able to check which people are more likely to get employed. And we have seen that those who are in long-term unemployment, that is, they have been without work for a period of 12 months or longer, it's difficult for them to get into the job market. And those without experience, also it's difficult for them to get jobs compared to those who have experience. And also the level of education plays a role as well, because we have seen that among those who have who are in of education. I think the disabled, the people with disability, I've already talked to that. How accurate is the information that we are presenting? As I have said, we have followed all the procedures that we have put in place from mode of collection. And we have quality measures put in place to ensure that the estimates that we published have gone through all the quality checks. So yes, the estimates that we are publishing are indeed accurate. Otherwise, the Statistician General would not have published these results. And then Honorable Nonzele. Yes, no, I don't think it's work in progress. These are the estimates, and they will not be revised because we have included all the records that we had collected for that particular quarter. Had there been some in the next quarter, revise the estimates and say the figure that we had published in the previous quarter has now changed because there were some records that were not included, which are now included. But what we have published for quarter two, we had included everything that we had collected. So there's nothing that will be changing in the next quarter. And in the next quarter, are we likely to see a better picture? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how the estimates look like. We can't project or predict how the estimates will look like. We have to collect first and then process and then come up with the estimates. And that's when then we'll see whether there's a change between quarter two and quarter three estimates. And as you were saying, you were expecting the discouraged work seekers, the number to be higher than what it is now. They indicated lockdown as a reason for not looking for work rather than discouragement. Because for us to say you were discouraged work seeker, you should, even if you have not looked for work, as long as you provide the reason that there are no jobs requiring your skills, or there are no jobs in the area where you live, or you've given up hope of finding any kind of work, then we regard you as a discouraged work seeker. But most people, or some of the people who were previously discouraged in the previous quarter, they have now moved out of discouragement, and they have provided the reason of a national lockdown as the main reason why they did not look for work. And in terms of the absence of contact numbers, yes, I have said we did not go to the full sample as a result of not having contact numbers for the full sample. However, we have made some adjustments using historical data from the previous school who have telephone numbers. You also highlighted the issue of including children as being problematic. As I have said, the reason why we include them is because of the compulsory school going age, and these children sometimes being able to do some light work after school, sorry. And you also indicated that over and above publishing estimates for those who are 15 years to 64, we should consider publishing estimates for those who are 18 years and older. And when we do benchmarking for the estimates that we have, we use the 5-year age groups, that is 15 to 19, 20 to 24 for those who are 18 years and older, but they won't be as accurate because we did not control for the 18 to 24, for instance, or 18 to 19, but rather we treated that group as 15 to 19. So the estimates we might produce, but they might not be as accurate as they should be. So we can provide those estimates, but then they'll have to be used with caution because we did not apply calibration or weighting. When we are doing the weighting, we did not control for the 18-year-olds, or we did not use the single-year age groups. Then Honorable Mdabe was talking about the Auditor General figures indicating that there were 16.2 million who claimed UIF, yet we are saying there were 14.1 million people who were employed. Sensitive data sources, that is the UIF, is arranged. So we might have to look at how their data is and maybe use it during the data confrontation before we publish our estimates. But the 16.2 million people who were paid UIF, I don't know how they compare with the employed, maybe more with the unemployed, but we can't really say there were 16.2 million people who were unemployed. Remember, I said we use the definitions that we have to regard the person as unemployed, not unemployed. And you were also proposing that maybe we should have a more coordinated approach when we deal with the data, which is more than welcome. So we'll have to work with the team at the Department of Labor and Employment that is looking at UIF data to see how we can work together to ensure that the estimates that we have, maybe we have looked at both sides, from StatsSA side as well as the Department of Labor and Employment side. I think those are the questions that were posed. I'm not sure if there's any question that I left out. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you very much, ma'am. Before I speak, there's somebody called Faisal Mohammed. Can she just indicate where is he coming from? No, I'm not asking from you. I see it in the.
I work with Faisal. He's from StatsSA.
Oh, you should have.
Yes.
You must. Okay. No, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Honorable members, there are the responses from your questions from StatsSA, which some of them are really touching into. Really, now we are in the new normal on how we are to do things. I'm raising this because when she was explaining the issue of a 15-year-old who, when he may be, if at his or her home there is a spaza and he or she is asked, she's doing some work. Now, a question arose from my mind that how then would you categorize a house is working the whole day? But I'm not expecting you to respond on that now. I think we will have to, at an appropriate time as the committee, look into all these areas discuss and see how best can we ensure that this perception or this feeling that this data may not be correct because of question that was asked that which is touches into the how then in how you collect your data. It's not going to be important that you have a more collaborated work or a check with the department, so that you don't have your own style of work. Maybe it has been like that from some time, but now we are in a new normal, and you must understand the panic. I wouldn't categorize it as the committee not trusting your work, but the panic is that on the ground, what we are then receiving from the Department of Employment and Labor and its entities in terms of the challenges of unemployment makes us to panic. And we would have then thought that the StatsSA will make us more empowered and more clarified. But the questions, in my view, are questions that are then bordering into not trusting the information. Will then at some time, I think, in looking into our program, because it is going to be very important. There's a presentation, there's another report that you are going to present on Thursday. And yeah, my little bit of a discomfort is that if members are questioning the authenticity of this report, I hope the one on Thursday is not going to also be questioned. But let me say to you, it's because we see what is happening on the ground in relation to UIF. Yes, there are categories in UIF of people that are claiming the normal UIF, those that are under TERS. So we will, which some of them are working, some of them have been working, some of them may have gone back to work. So it's a whole scenario which is a bit confusing and challenging in this time around. So thank you very much for that. Maybe I want to make a proposal that when we will then be calling you back, rest assured, and we will request this, not that we will request the StatsSA General, if it's possible, to have a day with us, so that we are then comfortable and ask all these difficult questions, and some of them that may arise. I think, honorable members, that is the situation. Yeah, thank you very much. We are then done with it. Oh, the last one. Please, I'm taken aback. I'm of the understanding that when you conduct the research, you are to check in all of the statutes that are should I say that are controlling whatever field. Here we're talking unemployment. The Constitution, the Labor Relations Act, I saw in the presentation, you did touch about the basic conditions of employment. So that's why Honorable Nkabane was touching into that, because you can't separate. You can't separate, and you can't. Can I be honest and open to you? You can't, as this department, say to us, you are not aware on some of the statutes that are in our, because in whatever we do, we do touch onto those. So please, in moving forward, ensure that you do touch into those. I hope I understood you very well. Was that what Honorable Nkabane was reflecting on? That there's the Constitution, there's the Labor Relations Act, there's basic conditions of employment, which touches into all, which have got they do describe what is meant by this and what is meant outside, which also include, I must not say outside, which also includes the ILO. But remember that we are South Africa and we have got statutes that are controlling and managing and assisting us to do the work. So thank you very much. When we come back, when I think, in my view, I think we need to really have you back so that we are able to further ask these difficult questions. Maybe after tomorrow's presentation, which I hope is this Thursday, tomorrow or next week, we will then have to call you back. Thank you very much, honorable members. Thank you, StatsSA. And yeah, you will then be excused, because we will then be dealing with the last item from our ready in responding to the NEHAWU memorandum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Sakaza,
Yes, Chair. Yes, Chair.
can we then, the department will indicate who's going to will be assisting in responding to the issues of the memorandum, that we have circulated it to them also, for them to come and take us through.
They said it's Miss Gimwili was gonna talk to that Chair. She's prepared something to talk about that.
Is it going to be put on the screen?
No, she said just she didn't prepare any presentation. She's gonna just respond on the memo, NEHAWU memo.
Oh, I would have thought that also would be on paper, but fine. Can we then hand over to you, ma'am?
Good morning. Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, honorable members. Chair, I'm going to be guided by you. I think the brief that I got was that I was going to respond to issues specific to the IES branch with relations to the memo that was handed by NEHAWU. I need to say that the matters that have been raised in the memo that affect the department much more broader than just the IES issue. So I had thought that probably Mr. Virgil Seafield was going to lead the discussion, then I will then come in on the issues that are specifically affecting the IES branch. Otherwise, yes.
He may then lead, and then you will then come on those areas that are affecting the inspection and enforcement. If he's ready, can
present on the NEHAWU memorandum. Chair, as Thando, as the Secretariat has indicated, there is no submission that we've made in as a presentation in this regard, and therefore I will deal with it in terms of the issues that have been raised by the memorandum. In the memorandum, Chair, there's about 15 demands that have been made in the memorandum from NEHAWU. 12 of these are not related and does not fall within the remit of the Department of Employment and Labor. But I will go through each of these demands and then indicate where it is, and to the extent that Ms. Moila will address the issues that are related to the IAS, she will then come in at that point. Chair, also in addition, and my apologies when.
Sorry for that. I want to make in terms of the process, can you take us through to areas where are please, so that we don't go into areas which are not within the ambit of our mandate and responsibility.
Thank you, Chair. That was the intention, that we will want to have been made, and where we are affected in terms of our remit, in terms of that. Chair, but before I do that, Chair, I'd also want to indicate to the House that when we did the introductions, as I've indicated, there were 4 of us of the department that have been included, but also, Chair, we have been subsequently joined by Ms. Baumi Madwesi of the Department of Employment, that is also in the meeting. So I just wanted to make that point as well, Chair. There are 3 areas that I've indicated that we are addressing the memorandum. The first area that we will address the memorandum is, number 1, that COVID-19 must not be used to reverse the hard-fought gains of employees. Our response to that issue, Chair, is very clear, and that the right of workers will not be affected by COVID-19. Workers' rights are entrenched in the Constitution as well as Act. During the period of COVID-19 pandemic, we ensured and continues to ensure that labor inspectors monitor and enforce compliance all labor legislation guaranteeing the protection of workers. Chair, however, we need to point out that the pandemic has raised a number of areas that we will probably have to look at going forward in terms of providing sufficient protection in the context of a pandemic, and where a pandemic has been called, and we need to think about how do we provide sufficient protection for workers so that workers are not unduly affected by this pandemic, Chair. And their rights are not unduly affected by this pandemic. Chair, the second issue is the issue in relationship to compliance committees and full implementation of the OHS Act to protect workers. That's the second demand that has been directed to the department, and I will request that Ms. Moila address this one going forward. Chair, can I, if with your concurrence, can I give the floor to Ms. Moila? Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairperson. In relation to the demand that has been made, I just want to point out that the department continues to conduct inspections, COVID-related inspections, and we know that the Occupational Health and Safety Act remains the primary law. And during the COVID pandemic, what we also look for is compliance with the OHS Act, as well as the hazardous biological agents regulations, because they relate to COVID-19. And to this end, today, we started conducting those inspections, OHS related, on the 27th of March. And the data that I'm giving you is up to the 7th of October. We have conducted about 7,300 inspections. Chair, we found that the compliance rates are really low, particularly in the public sector, and the private sector is sitting at 58%. When you look at the data as it affects the public sector, which had been a matter of keen interest for NEHAWU, you'll find that when you look at when you break the public sector further down and you zoom into the health sector, you'll find that 77, they were complying in that sector, which is a 41% compliance. And as mentioned there, you find that the plan, it does not give effect to the risk assessment itself. We found that there's a problem with provision of PPEs. We know that PPEs are beyond just items of clothing, that you mean the masks, the sanitizers. There had been instances where you find that some workplaces will purchase bulk sanitizers, and when you ask for a specification to see whether there is compliance with the prescripts, because we know that the sanitizers have got to comply to health protocols in terms of the contents. And you find that some workplaces wouldn't even have those specifications. We found that there's been a problem with adapting of workstations. We know the distance that has been promulgated, and you find that in some cases at a shop floor level, workers would not be the spaces are such that there isn't compliance to those distances. And we know that the COVID regulations have been adapted October, and each one of them, although the differences are not huge, has put very strict screening protocols, disinfecting protocols, and social distancing protocols as well. So you find that there's a violation of such. I also need to point out, Chair, that what is of keen interest is that with the latest COVID-19 regulation, direct from an environment that is not compliant with health and safety measures. If we go through the entire section, find that obviously having followed due process, a worker has got a right to refuse to work due to exposure to COVID-19. And the due process is a right not to work. And I need to point out that in all this more than 7,000 inspections that we've done, we haven't come across a case where workers had voluntarily opted to walk out and refuse to work in areas of undue exposure. So we're saying we'd like to make a call that these rights should be utilized. Say that we know that the occupational health and safety places the prerogative to provide a healthy and safe workplace on the employer. However, employees themselves are not exonerated. They've got a role to play. The employer has got to make sure that they are safe working conditions, but employees also have got to make sure that they also exercise their own rights and they observe the protocols of health. Also, there must be functional committees, health and safety committees, where there are 20 or more employees. It's compulsory that there must be a health and safety committee in place. Where the numbers are less, there must be health and safety champions. And the protocol also talks to health and safety, what do you call it? Just forgot the name. Compliance officers that have got also to be appointed. So all those making sure that there's implementation and that people's rights are also safeguarded. So, Chair, thank you very much.
Mr. Seafood.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, that's the outward looking as it relates to the labor market out there. But there's also an internal focus that NEHAWU has returned to work in isolation, 10 days of self-isolation, confirmed fitness by a medical doctor. So I'm going to ask Ms. Matabisi to talk to the internal focus as well as the Monty that relates to the return to work and self-isolation in this regard. Ms. Matabisi, if you will, Chair, thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, honorable members and colleagues. Chair, I'll talk to demand C that Mr. Seafield has just mentioned in terms of compliance to OHS Act, risk assessments and infection control and establishment of OHS committees and full implementation of the OHS Act to protect workers. As he rightfully said, we as department internally have to also comply to what the IGS has just said in terms of the compliance as an employer. Now, internally, we've signed a collective agreement, an OHS collective agreement with organized labor in the departmental bargaining chamber. And then we did that at the GPSSBC, the General Public Service Sectoral Bargaining Council. And then NEHAWU and PSA are both signatories to the collective agreement. It has been put in place, everybody has signed. And the department has then also StatsSA Act, and also the compliance officers have been appointed in all the provinces that we have, the 9 provinces, as well as in the labor centers. We've got compliance champions, as the DDGIES mentioned. And then on the return to work and self-isolation, demand number 4, 10 days of self-isolation and confirmed fitness by the medical doctor. The employment conditions that are governing COVID-19 in the public service are guided by the Department of Public Service and Administration. So they issue circulars, they've been issuing all kinds of guidelines, and they're also being guided by the Department of Health and the Center for Communicable Diseases. I think I'm mentioning the right institute. And then in addition to the national notices by the Department of Employment and Labor that are applicable to workers, circulars are also, as I mentioned, issued by DPSA for the return to work plan for public servants. And this has happened since we went back to work on level 4. Now, we then developed our own internal departmental return to work plan, which was very fluid. As we moved to different levels, we then update it to meet the demands of the succeeding levels. And then the compliance officer would also be part of that. And we also set up a crisis management team, which was to ensure and also check the level of compliance and ensure that as we return to work bit by bit, as determined by and dictated by the different levels, our employees are safe. We started with a basic thing where, for example, the first thing that we had to make sure was to make sure that the offices are cleaned and they're thoroughly cleaned, they're disinfected. And then as we went through, we checked the numbers, spacing, all sorts of things, putting up sanitizers. I think Memwila mentioned everything, but it was in an outward looking kind of way. So internally, we did comply with all those. And the latest one that we had was to ensure that our OHS committees are actually monitoring all these things that we've set out on the return to work plan. And the latest one was issuing a circular internally. And the fact that we also need to protect our 60-year-olds, over 60s, and vulnerable employees and those that have contracted the disease, we got a directive from DPSA that confirms that you cannot allow a person to go back to work if they were hospitalized due to COVID infection. They need to have 10 days of self-isolation beyond hospitalization. And then before they get back to work, we need to come to the department to say this person is fit for work. So basically, that is the bit. I think there are some other issues where I will then request that Mr. Seafield would allow me to just come in where the need arises, Chairperson. Thank you so much.
Mr. Seafield, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I also make that mistake.
Sorry for that.
I also make the same mistake, Chair. Chair, there's in a list of 6 other demands that follows the issue that Ms. Matubisi has addressed that requires the intervention of the Department of Occupation of Health that deals with these issues. And for the sake of completeness, I'll raise them, but I will not respond to them as I've indicated. It requires that the demand by NEHAWU, the National Department of Health, to issue a circular in this regard. There's an issue of daily screening of health workers. There's an issue of board exams for foreign trained doctors to be prioritized, and the National Department of Health to review reporting on COVID-19 fatalities, as well as the filling of vacancies in the healthcare. In addition to that, is the implementation and risk allowance for frontline workers. These are issues that are related to the Department of Health, and therefore the Department of Employment and Labor is not within is the processing of COIDA claims in line with the COIDA Act of 1993. And the department wanted to confirm that all claims are processed and continue to be processed according to the COIDA Act, Chair. There's the next one that relates to the procurement and provision of PPEs to be based on credible figures of the total workforce. I'd like again of PPEs, Ms. Matubisi, if you can come in, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On the procurement and provision of PPEs to be based on credible figures of total workforce and type of work performed by occupational category. We procure our PPEs and also allocate them to our different frontline staff and internal staff based on the risk that they are exposed to. For example, you would give an inspector a different type of PPE if they're going to inspect a certain type of employment area. And then you'd give a totally different one to a person who's going to be dealing with clients that come in at the labor centers. And then we allocate, we also make sure that we've got sufficient provision of stock on as and when the demand arises, so that we are able to issue and distribute the PPEs on time to those that need the PPEs. So we don't allow our employees to go out without sufficient PPE.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Seafield.
Chair, then if you allow me to continue and allow us to continue in our response to the NEHAWU memorandum, there's the issue of psychosocial support for workers, which Ms. Matubisi will also respond to as it is inward-looking. Chair, thank you, Ms. Matubisi.
Can I check? Can I check with those, because some of these demands in the memorandum, as you have said, they cut across either in the DPSA, health. Now, if you are responding, are you responding only in terms of what is affecting employment and labor, which I do understand that NEHAWU is organized even in that area, or are you responding on behalf of all the departments that are cited? Because if you go through the memorandum, you will see that there are quite a number of departments that the demands, some of them are demands that are pertaining to a particular department, health, DPSA, and so forth. So if you can just clarify me on that.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, you would have noticed that when we shared the platform in terms of our response, is that to the extent that there's an external, the demand of NEHAWU as an external focus, we as Ms. Moelwa has done, we will respond to that. To the extent that the demand affects the department, in addition to other departments, we wanted to provide it. We had wanted to provide a more comprehensive response to the extent that it affects the department only. Unfortunately, at this stage, we will not respond to those issues where it affects other departments, because we don't have the mandate to respond to those issues affecting other departments. I have just raised the issues that are within the memorandum as a matter of totality, rather than to respond to those issues, Chief. So what we are doing is, one, to respond both as it affects externally our members, to the extent that it has an implication for the department. Two, we're responding to to the issues that affect the department directly, and those are the two issues where we respond. And thirdly, Chair, we will not be able to respond to issues where we don't have a mandate and it affects other departments. Chair, I thought that would provide some clarity on your question.
Okay. All right, I'm clarified. You can then
Thank you,
continue.
Chair. I think the last issue that there are two more demands that have been raised in the NEHAWU memorandum. One is the issue of psychosocial support for workers, and Ms. Matibisi will respond to it as it affects workers within the department only. And there's a collective bargaining DPS as it affects workers in the public service as opposed to workers generally in the workforce. So the last area and demand that we will respond to is the psychosocial support for workers as it affects the department, the workers of the department directly. So I'll ask Ms. Matibisi to address that, and Chair, that will then conclude our input on the NEHAWU memorandum. Ms. Matibisi.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Virgil. And on the psychosocial support for workers, Chairperson, we've got a unit within Human Resources Management called Employee Health and Wellness. And also we've got doctors that are employed within Compensation Fund. The two wings were very instrumental during this process, and they continue to be very instrumental in making sure that our staff who are affected and those that may become sick, it also affects the people that are around them. So even the employees that work with them. So as we provide the psychosocial support through employee health and wellness service providers, we also extend that to the family members, and we also extend them to the fellow workers who might be also impacted by the affected employee. That is that in short. Thank you, Chair.
Chair has indicated that would conclude our input on the NEHAWU memorandum. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Sheffield. Is there any comment from members?
Yes, Chair. Mkondo.
Yes, Honorable Mkondo.
As you said, Chair, it's a comment. We welcome the presentation, our schedule for oversight visits, because it indicates that during this COVID-19 era, there is a lot that has to be monitored. Thank you.
Mkondo, any other comments? In the absence of none, I would it's only that I didn't want to be unfair to members. But it has been it's quite difficult to get a presentation which is not on paper. It's really, it's only that we've been dealing with the area of work which is like this for the first time. And at the end of today, Mr. Sheffield, by the end of today, a presentation which is on paper in relation to these areas that you've spoken to must then be sent to the office of Mr. Sakaza, who is our committee secretary, so that it is then circulated to members for the report to the office of the speaker that has directed the committee to look into the memorandum. So it has really been unfair. If it wasn't that we are dealing with an issue for the first time, I would have said, no, we're not going to be, because really, it is not fair. So that's why by the end of today, we must get that. Having said that, honorable members, I think that is in relation that I think we are done with our agenda items in terms of today's meeting. And thank you very much to Mr. Seafield and your team. But please, I saw that the parliamentary liaison officer is part of the meeting. So he must, this directive, he must ensure that it is then being carried out. By the end of today, we must get that information. Having said that, honorable members, we are preparing now in the next meetings that are going to take place. We'll then be preparing for the BRRR. As you are relieved, they can leave the meeting. Honorable Mr. Sakaza, Mr. Seafield, and the other people from the department.
Okay, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Into a preliminary assessment of the department, which it's going to be, we'll be looking into all quarters, quarter one, quarter two, and I'm aware that we have not yet dealt with quarter three and quarter four. So what we are going to do, the Secretariat is going to circulate to members, quarter three and quarter four, look into that as we are dealing with a preliminary assessment of the department, so that when they come to present their APP, we may then have that opportunity. So that meeting, Mr. Sakaza, you will remind me the date, is going to be our meeting as the committee. And in that, we will then our notes for record purposes, so that when they come and we will then match what we have observed and what then they have then be presenting. We must also remember that our department is one of those departments that had a challenge, is the UIF. So we will have to be meticulous. We'll have to be focused, so that we are then able to go through their APP with this advantage that we may then be having, which is then our next meeting. Secondly, is that next week we are having an executive statement. We are having our executive statement, which is going to be a debate, which the date is the 20th. And the last thing is that, honorable members, tomorrow, the president has called a joint sitting. And as members of employment and labor, we will have to be, I'm not saying members are not attentive, we'll have to be attentive, because we have always been concerned about the issue of the economy of the country, and the issue of jobs, and the issue of unemployment. So we'll then have to, I thought from my side, I will then have to, the preliminary assessment will then be on the 21st, will then be on the 21st, which is next week. And there is the program in front of us, honorable members. I thought I'd just have to make those comments. Any take? What then we will then do when we get that the third and the fourth quarter, among other things that we will do on the 21st, is that we then have to adopt them. If there are any, I think that's that. I'd like to say, if there is none, can we call it a day for now? We will meet with those that will be in the house tomorrow on the joint sitting. Thank you very much, honorable members. Our meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
And
Thank you, Chair.
goes, Honorable Mkonto, I am going to call you. I owe you a response.